الحسين الثالثة بأعلى أصواتكم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أأنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشروا بمغفرة وأجر كريم إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون أأتخذ من دونه آلهة يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغن عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا يوقظون إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين. آمنا بالله. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلى على محمد وعلى آله وسلم.
اللهم صل على فاطمة وأبيها وبعلها وبنيها والسر المستودع فيها بعدد ما حاط به الملك. Alhamdulillah, we have a good crowd that is coming today. We'd like to appreciate everyone for attending the Majlis Fatimiyya. The schedule will be similar to previous nights. We will have a children's program that will be held in the rooms on the side here. There is going to be the live stream as well in the toddler's room. So if you want to be with your toddler in that room, you can enjoy the live stream that is currently being recorded, inshallah. We will have a small poem, inshallah, before we get started with the lecture from Sister Naha for her health and the health of all of the families in this community. Let's recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Assalamualaikum, brothers and sisters. Let us take our hearts to the last moments of the Sadiqa. In ode to the lunar star's demise, I will recite this poem. The hadith that says, Fatima was such that when she stood in mihrab to pray, a light from her shone for the people of the sky, just as the stars shine for the people of the earth. You know, they say that just before a star combustes, just before a star dies, it shines the brightest at that time. Lady Fatima's truth, purity, and witness of the final message manifested the most once her mission on earth had been completed. On her final night on this earth, she has to be alone, as if her light is preparing to transition to the heavens. Narrations say that when she departs, her husband buried her at night without informing anybody, and he said the janazah by himself. Imam Sadiq ﷺ says that it's only Imam Ali ﷺ that could do her ghusl, for only a Siddiq can wash a Siddiqah. Today, we see only the Siddiq can even touch the grave of the Siddiqah. For today, we don't know where her grave lies. We don't know where this Siddiqah, where this Tahira, where this Shahida is buried, because she's the secret of Allah on this earth. I held it onto empty stones and engraved you in my heart. Ya Fatima Zahra, my heart became your graveyard. Mother Fatima, I made a grave for you in my heart. May you all make a grave for her in your hearts. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
We are honored for a third day in a row to be blessed with the presence of Shaikh Mahdi, one of the more renowned scholars in the North American communities. Without further ado, I would like to ask him to attend the minbar with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله
حد محدود ولا نعت موجود ولا وقت معدود ولا أجل ممدود. أما بعد فقد قال الله الحكيم في محكم كتابه الكريم: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم: ومن يعش عن ذكر الرحمن نقيض له شيطانا فهو له قرين وإنهم ليصدونهم عن السبيل ويحسبون أنهم مهتدون حتى إذا جاءنا قال يا ليت بيني وبينك بعد المشرقين فبئس القرين. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات For the love of our beloved Prophet and his beloved progeny, the second loud salawat. For the hastening and the return of our beloved 12th Imam, the third final loud salawat. The topic we'll be discussing today, inshallah, is the topic of spiritual freedom. When we look into today's world, you will find there are people who benefit from this concept that we refer to as freedom. There is political and social freedom in certain parts of the world, in certain countries of the world. In other parts of the world, you will find sometimes Muslims fighting for that freedom. They strive to gain that political and social freedom. The Palestinian people today, the Lebanese people today, many of the Shia around the world in Pakistan and other parts of the world today, they sacrifice in order to gain this political and spiritual freedom. They give from their blood, from their women, from their children, from their families to gain that freedom. This is that physical, social, political freedom that the Quran has in fact encouraged. The Quran speaks very highly of those who are willing to sacrifice in order to bring this freedom to their people. Not only did the Quran touch on this, the Quran went one step further. The Quran also said there are those who don't fight for their own freedom, they also fight for the freedom of others who are oppressed by tyrants and kings. The Quran said, مَا لَكُمْ لَا تُقَاتِلُونَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. Why is it that you don't step up to fight for those وَالْمُسْتَضْعَفِينَ مِنَ الرِّجَالِ وَالنِّسَاءِ وَالْوِلْدَانِ? Why don't you step up to fight for those who are not in your land, but in other lands who are being oppressed? الَّذِينَ يَقُولُونَ رَبَّنَا أَخْرِجْنَا مِنْ هَذِهِ الْبَلْدَةِ. They say, oh Allah, help us and grant to us freedom. The Quran put this responsibility on the Muslims as well. Not only were you to sacrifice for the political freedom of yourself, social freedom of your own people, rather if you found a people in another land who were being oppressed, the Quran put this burden on the Muslims as well. But all of this refers to that political and social freedom that I have. Physical freedom that I have. In today's world, many Muslims of the world, they benefit from this freedom. There are also those who do not benefit from this freedom and they are striving to gain this freedom. However, in Quran and Hadith, there is another type of freedom that is brought up a lot as well. There's a different type of freedom that Quran and Ahl Bayt touched on as well, which we would refer to as spiritual freedom. The Quran and Ahl Bayt came forward and said, listen, there are people who might have physical freedom, but they have lost this spiritual freedom of theirs. This spiritual freedom, it is not gained by physical warfare, unlike the first. The first, one has to go to the battlefield when he is attacked. One has to go to defend his rights physically. The Quran came forward and the Hadith came forward and said, listen, there's a different type of freedom. This one, it takes spiritual warfare. It is an inner struggle for you to gain the second type of freedom. And it is regardless of what you have in the first type of freedom. There are those who don't have the first type of freedom, but they have the second type of spiritual freedom. And there are those who have the first type of freedom. They are physically free, but they have lost their spiritual freedom. Therefore, it's a completely different concept as well. This type of freedom is what you find a lot in Quran and Hadith. And in particular, you also find it in the words of Lady Fatima. When she came and stood in Masjid al-Haram, and she spoke, or in Masjid al-Nabi, and spoke to the people of Saqifa, who had now began to take away some of her rights. And she said, the reason why you are taking away our rights today is because you have lost your own spiritual freedom. You're giving into your desires, and these desires are so strong that the message that my father brought for you, and the government that my father put together, now you are immediately ruining it after his demise and after his passing. She also touched on this. Therefore, today we want to take some time to understand, what is this spiritual freedom? Usually when this term comes up, we have a very vague understanding of it, very abstract understanding of it. Practically, what does it mean for me to have spiritual freedom? How am I supposed to gain this? And when we say spiritual freedom, who's trying to captivate me, then I'm trying to be free from them anyways. Any type of freedom always has someone who's trying to captivate you, who's trying to take away that freedom away from you. So when it comes to spiritual freedom, who is trying to captivate me? Today, inshallah, we'll delve into this topic and we'll pose the following questions. Number one, what is spiritual freedom? And a spiritually free person, what is he free from? Number two, what are the different stages to a person who loses his spiritual freedom, and the different levels and stages to a person who gains his spiritual freedom? Number three, what examples do we have in history from individuals who lost their spiritual freedom, and what type of corruptions did they create because of that? Number four, which marja was it who had a high level of spiritual freedom, and when he realized there are others who are to take on the authority instead of him, because of this spiritual freedom that he had, he was willing to pass on this authority to those who were more deserving. And number five, and finally, what did Lady Fatima say in Khutbah Fatakiyya, referring to the people of Saqifa, letting them know that their decisions today is because they have lost their own spiritual freedom. Tonight, inshallah, or today, inshallah, we'll delve into these 5 questions with the loud salawat ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Let us begin from here. This term of spiritual freedom is thrown around a lot. Most people, in fact, do not even know what this term refers to. They don't have a correct understanding of what it means on a practical level. Freedom from what? The Quran and Ahl Bayt came forward and said, listen, regardless of whether you have physical freedom or not, which of course is highly encouraged in Islam, because Islam taught us as a Muslim, you have one principle. You have to be amongst those who are la tazlimun wa la tudlamun. As a Muslim, your political philosophy in this world is that you don't oppress others, but that you are also not allowing others to oppress you. La tadlimun, you don't oppress others, but you also do not allow others to oppress you. This is your political philosophy in this world. Yes, this is physical freedom. When it came to spiritual freedom, Quran and Hadith said, listen, there's something deeper happening here, and gaining this spiritual freedom is even more difficult than gaining your physical freedom. As difficult it is, as much as you have to sacrifice for your physical freedom, then gaining the spiritual freedom is even more difficult. This is manifested in that famous hadith of the Prophet where he saw his people coming back from a military expedition. They were coming back from this military expedition as Sariyya, as the hadith calls it, which are expeditions where the Prophet would not join the army himself. He would send a group to go and fight on their own. When they were coming back, the Prophet welcomed them. And he said, Marhaban biqawmin, welcome to the people who have carried out al-jihad al-asghar. They have carried out the lesser, the smaller struggle. Yes? But it still remains in front of them, al-jihad al-akbar. They still now have to deal with gaining their spiritual freedom. And then the Prophet made it clear that the second one be more difficult than the first one. So what you did, as difficult as it was, is easier than being able to gain your spiritual freedom. Okay, so spiritual freedom from what? I thought freedom, if you go around and ask people today, what does it mean that you have freedom? What does it mean that your country is the leader of the free world, as they say? Yes? The lie that's been sold to Americans all over this country. They say, well, listen, to be free means I get to do whatever I like, whatever I desire. Oh no, turn left, turn right, turn right. Take the vaccine, take it. Don't want to take the vaccine, don't want to take the vaccine. Have a gun, don't want to have a gun, whatever the case might be, I want to have freedom. No one can tell me what to do. Therefore, the way they define freedom is whatever you desire, you can act on it. Whatever you wish, you can act on it. Of course, in limited fashion, but this is the definition. Yes? Quran and Hadith came and gave a little bit different definition. They said what? They said, listen, these desires that you say, if I can act on them, I'm free. Those same desires can become the means of your captivity. How? If you take those desires and you continue to act upon them in a way where you don't limit yourself, you become a captive of that desire of yours. That desire that initially you said, whatever I like, I do, can become the means of your captivity. It can steal your freedom from you. It can reach a point where even now when you don't want to do something, because you have the desire, you feel like you have to do it. It's almost turning into an addiction. Yes, I'll give you a very basic analogy. You know, when you are growing up, yes, initially when you're younger, you probably don't drink coffee. Yes, coffee is not really a thing for you. Because alhamdulillah, you have so much energy, metabolism, whatever the case might be. Yes, you don't really feel like you need that coffee anyways. Then maybe when you hit college and you have to study a little bit more, then when you're a parent, definitely, because you know the child woke you up 2 o'clock in the morning last night, it's a lot more difficult. So now you begin to have this coffee. Initially when you have coffee, it's a desire that you have. You initially consume this coffee. If you continue to fulfill this desire over and over and over again, it goes from being something that you decided to do and that you chose to do, to now being an addiction. Now if you don't have the coffee, can't even carry out life. That's why some people on their WhatsApp status, they put what? If I don't respond, it means that the coffee hasn't kicked in yet. Yes. I haven't had my coffee yet. Don't even talk to me before I have my coffee. Now this person, if they don't have their coffee, they have a headache. They don't have their coffee, they can't even function in today's society anymore. So what happened here? A basic desire, because it was fulfilled so much without any limitations, it slowly went from being a desire, a means of your freedom, to becoming a means of your captivity. Now your hands are tied by that coffee. Now your functionality is all tied to whether I have my coffee or not. Now this is a harmless example. Coffee is not a big deal. You take this, and Quran and Hadith said the same thing can happen when it comes to all of the rest of your desires as well. Every other desire the human being has, if it goes unchecked, no limitations, it will turn into an addiction. The only problem is in the societies that we live in, these addictions, we don't have names for them. So in today's world, in today's society, if you say this person has an addiction, that means now they're addicted to some substance, yes? To some, drug or, so on and so forth. But if you say this person is addicted to gaining wealth, no matter what happens, no amount of wealth is enough for them. They want to gain more and more and more. And they're willing to do anything unethical to get their hands on more money. Quran and Hadith says this person is ill. This person is sick. He has an addiction to gaining wealth. But in today's culture and society, they say no. He's a very successful businessman. They don't have words for it. They don't have terminology for it. Because they don't even have this worldview. So if there's a person who's addicted to attention, constantly wants people's eyes to be on them, willing to do anything to get clicks, willing to do anything to get views, willing to do anything so people are looking at them. Islam will say this person is addicted, this person is ill, this person is sick. But in today's society, they say, no, they're a very successful influencer. They do a very good job at grabbing people's attention. Okay, so they're grabbing people's attention at what cost? Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what you do. They won't turn to you and say there's something wrong with you. No, why? Because this culture, this society, materialistic culture, doesn't even have this worldview, doesn't even understand this concept. They say the more you fulfill your desires, the more successful you are. Quran and Hadith says sometimes when you continue without any limits, those desires now tie your hands. Now even when you don't want to do something, because you fulfilled that desire so much, you end up doing what? You end up ruining your whole life. But it's a desire. Your hands are tied by that desire now. You're addicted by that desire. You have now lost your spiritual freedom to that desire. Ask of the marriages in today's society, how many of these marriages come to an end early? 50% is the average rate, yes, in this country. God knows how many of these other marriages, there's other relationships in them and so on and so forth, yes? Okay, now ask this man who is done something wrong, he has been unfaithful, yes, forgive me, but he's been unfaithful in his marriage. Ask him if he wanted to ruin his family and ruin the future of his kids and ruin the future of his relationship. He'll tell you no. But what happened? Desires were so strong that he could not say no anymore. Why? Because he did not learn how to limit these desires. Now, if he's a person who has relationships with multiple individuals, Islam says this person is ill, he's sick, he has an addiction, he's lost his spiritual freedom. In today's society, they say, look, he's very famous, he's very appealing. Anybody is willing to present themselves to him. This is, you see the difference, and this is, by the way, the culture we throw our children in is this culture. This is the culture we're constantly teaching our children, yes? Okay. So this spiritual freedom, Quran and Hadith came and said, if you want to be able to have that spiritual freedom, where your desires don't dictate where you go, you actually go where you want to go, the way to do that is to limit these desires, is to not constantly feed them. And this is a contradiction that seems at least like a contradiction to us. Quran and Hadith came and said, if you want to be free, you have to limit yourself. But I thought being free is about not having any limitations. Yes, in the materialistic world, if you want to be free, so your desires don't get the best of you, you have to do what? You have to limit yourself. That's the only way to go about it. There's no other way. Say, oh no, Shaikh, I don't want any limitations. This Islam is too restrictive. I want to eat whatever I want to eat. I want to do whatever I want to do. Islam says, okay, that's your free will. You want to live life like that? You can live life like that. But if you live life like that, eventually your desires will captivate you. You're going to become the slave of something. It's either Allah or your desire. This is your choice. You think the one who is giving himself permission to do whatever he wants to do, he's living really a free life? No, he's not living a free life. Now his desires have captivated him. He has now lost his spiritual freedom. And hence you find there were people in history, they lost their spiritual freedom. Sometimes even when they didn't want to do something, their desires would push them to do it. And of course we're going to mention some extremes, but to a lesser extent, that is you and I as well. To a lesser extent, if I don't limit my desires, it can also ruin my life. It can also ruin my marital relationship. It can also ruin my relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It can also bring corruption in my own life. Maybe not to the extent of these extremes that we will mention, but in limited ways, it's from you and I as well. The prime example of a person who had lost his spiritual freedom, he was now doing stuff just because he had this desire. Even though deep down, if you ask him, do you want to do this? He'll tell you, no, I don't want to do this. One of the prime examples was Umar ibn Sa'd in Karbala. Umar ibn Sa'ad, they promised him the governorship of Ray. Ray at that time was not a city. Ray at that time was a region. Yes. And for so many days he was in Karbala, he did not want to kill the daughter or the son of the daughter of the Prophet. He did not want to do this. He's on record in history saying, listen, can't this Yazid and the grandson of the Prophet come to some sort of a agreement, some sort of understanding? Umar ibn Sa'ad, he got to Karbala earlier in the Ashra, yes? But Karbala, Ashura didn't take place until the 10th of Muharram. So what was he doing throughout all these days? All these days he was having conversation with both sides, waiting to see if maybe there's a way where I don't have to end up killing Hussein to get the governorship of Ray. But eventually his problem was what? The governorship of Ray was too nice of a promise to him. That desire was too strong for him. Even though technically deep down he doesn't want to do it, but the desires are too strong. So they dangled this in front of him until eventually he said what? On the 10th of Muharram, he said, everyone bear witness. When he knew there was no other way, the only way he could get his hands on this governorship was to do what? Was to kill the grandson of the Prophet. Eventually he took the first arrow on the 10th of Muharram. He said, everyone bear witness. And tell the Amir that I was the one who began this war. Why? Because earlier he received a letter saying, listen, if you're not willing to get rid of the grandson of the Prophet, yes, we will send others who will come and get rid of the grandson of the Prophet. If you're not up to the task, we can have others do it, but there's no governorship of Ray for you anymore. This is a person who's lost his desires. Similarly, you see this also in the people of Saqifa. Saqifa was a place near, yes, the Masjid al-Nabi, where people used to gather to discuss different issues, yes? This is what Saqifa means. It's called Saqifa of Bani Sa'ida. Take a look at in history what happened when the Prophet had passed away and his body is not even buried yet. There's already people, their desires have taken over. This is not the Shi'i version of that story. This is the Sunni version of that story. In Al-Tabari and in the book of As-Saqifa and other sources, the conversations that took place in Saqifa. What was happening there? It's all desires. It's all, no. We're supposed to be Amin. So the Ansar gathered there first. When the Ansar gathered there first, they said, listen, we were the ones who saved you guys when you were being massacred in Mecca. And they were right. So if it wasn't for Ansar, the Prophet wouldn't have any refuge, wouldn't have any place to go. So the Ansar gathered there earlier. You know why? They said, you know what, we have to get ahead of this thing. We have to make sure we make decisions before others show up. Then the first Khalifa, the second Khalifa, yes, Abu Ubaidah al-Jarrah, they heard, oh, there's big decisions being made. We're not getting any hold of these decisions. We're not going to get our share in it. So then they came. When they came, they said, yes, it's true that you guys were the one who gave refuge to the Prophet, but we were the ones who went through all those difficulties. We were the ones who did hijrah. We were the ones who were massacred in Mecca. We were the ones who put our lives on their lines. And guess what? They were all right about all of that as well. The Muhajirin did all of this. So this back and forth happened for so long that eventually they're negotiating on Khilafah. They're negotiating like, do you want to have it? Should I have it? Then they knew, the Ansar knew that, you know what? We can't have this situation. So they said, you know what? We'll do this. We'll do this compromise. Minna Amir wa minkum Amir. 1 year, there will be a Khalifa from your side, and then the next one will be from us, and then back and forth. The Muhajirin, they came forward, they said, no, this is not a good idea. The Prophet said his Khalifa would be from who? Would be from Quraysh. Rings a bell. Would be from Quraysh. So because it needs to be from Quraysh, we will be the Khulafa, you guys can be the ministers. In all of this, is anyone asking, let's see what the Prophet of Allah wanted? Let's see what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted? No. Because when you have lost your spiritual freedom, all desires. Hence you read in history, based on some sources, that when Fatima opposed the first two Khulafa, and in history, the second Khalifa was far more harsh in his approach. The first Khalifa, at least on the surface, was a little bit more easygoing. And in some narrations, he walked away and he was teary-eyed because Fatima told them when they came to visit her at her house, which is in Bukhari, that I am displeased with you all. Not happy with you. Yes? That he walked away teary-eyed. So here's a person, his desires have got the best of him. Maybe he doesn't even want this. Maybe he knows this is going to be a problem for him in the akhirah. But desires are too strong. So if you go to him and say, oh, so you're teary-eyed, so you think this is wrong. He says, no. I still want that khilafah. I still want to be in power. His desires are too strong. It's a person who's lost his spiritual freedom. So Quran and Hadith told us there are levels to this. The first level is this person doesn't want to do something deep down, but his desires are the ones who dictate to him. This is the base level of losing your spiritual freedom. Then comes a second level. This second level is where now Shaitan comes and guides him on this path. So he's going to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's going to go against the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But because he has continued down this road so far, now Shaitan whispers to him and tells him how to do it in a better way. Quran says, وَإِنَّ الشَّيَاطِينَ لَيُوحُونَ إِلَىٰ أَوْلِيَائِهِمْ. The shayateen, they do wahy, they inspire who? Their awliya, their best buddies. To do what? لِيُجَادِلُوكُمْ. So that they can give them the best arguments so that they can come and argue with you. So, this person is going to argue against the truth. The Quran is saying shayateen will come and do wahy to him. The Quran is saying the shayateen will come and inspire with him. They'll tell him, listen, you're gonna stand up against the truth anyways, yeah? You're gonna deny this genocide anyways. But this is what you should say. You should bring up this. You should bring up that. I was listening to one of these pundits one time. He said, no, what's happening in Palestine today is not a genocide. So why is it not a genocide? He said, because, see, imagine, after starving millions of people, denying water, denying food, medicine, bombing people with drones, shooting kids in the head with snipers. After all of this, no, it's not a genocide. Why? Because the number of Palestinians that have been born in the past year are more than the number of Palestinians that have been killed. This was his argument. His argument was basically, we haven't killed enough for you to say this is a genocide. We've deprived them of everything that they have in life, but no, this is not a genocide. Is it possible that Shaitan does wahy of these type of arguments? Very much possible. The Quran said the second level is where this person not only goes against what he knows is right because of his desires, Shaitan comes and assists him on the way. Shaitan comes in, helps him on the way as well. So during the time of the Prophet came forward and said, listen, from now on, the meat that you consume, it has to be slaughtered properly. It has to be dhabiha. So some of the kuffar came and said, you know what? What better meat is there than the meat that Allah has done dhabiha of it himself? So what do you mean the meat that Allah has done dhabiha of it himself? He said, this prophet of yours said if an animal has just died, you can't eat it. You have to throw it away. Yes? No. The animal that has died, Allah has done dhabiha of it himself. So what better dhabiha than this? The Quran said, وَإِنَّ الشَّيَاطِينَ لَيُوحُونَ إِلَىٰ أَوْلِيَائِهِمْ. They tell them what to do. This is level number 2. Then there's a person who graduates from level number 2 to level number 3, where now he reaches a point, the Quran says, there is a shaitan who is a qareen for him. Qareen means he's a friend, he's an acquaintance. So the Quran said, the one who turns away from Allah, if he continues down this path, we will appoint for him a shaitan who will live with him. فَهُوَ لَهُ قَرِينٌ. And constantly, every second of the day, this person, the shaitan is whispering in his ears. You should do this. You should do that. وَإِنَّهُمْ لَيَصُدُّونَهُمْ عَنِ السَّبِيلِ. They constantly do what? Turn them away from the right path. These jinn that are living with them, these shayateen that are living with them, constantly whispering, you should do this, you should do that. وَيَحْسَبُونَ أَنَّهُمْ مُهْتَدُونَ. But he thinks he's on the right path. So the Quran says, then he shows up on the day of judgment, and he finds out, oh, there's been shayateen living with me. حَتَّى إِذَا جَاءَنَا, until he comes to us. Then he sees the shaitans that have been living with him. He says, يَا لَيْتَ بَيْنِي وَبَيْنَكَ بُعْدَ الْمَشْرِقَيْنِ. How ugly are you? How terrible are you? I don't want to be around you. This is that same shaitan and jinn that was with him in this world, constantly doing what? Constantly whispering in his ears. You know, in our culture, most people are afraid of jinn. Yes? If you tell them in that room there's jinn, don't go there, nobody will go. Yes? But the Quran said if you disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continuously without repentance, it will reach a point where a shaitan will be appointed for you. A jinn will live with you. But nobody's scared of this one. Only the spooky one people are afraid of, yes? Only the spooky one we're afraid of. They say, oh, there was this door over there, it closed on its own. Ya Allah. Nobody goes in that house anymore. But the Quran said word by word, literally, that if you sin and you continue on that path, نُقَيِّضْ لَهُ شَيْطَانًا. This is Surah Fussilat for those who are interested. 37 to 39. Verse 37 to 39. The Quran literally said, we will put a shaitan for you, just for you. But these Muslims are not worried about this. They disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, commit sins. Oh, it's not a problem, it's not a problem. Well, the Quran said that jinn will be appointed for you, specifically for you. This is the third level of losing spiritual freedom. Then there are those, on the other hand, who gains their spiritual freedom. Allah salawat, please. There are those who gain their spiritual freedom, and this is also at 3 different levels. The first level, my desires do not dictate my actions. This is the first level of spiritual freedom. The second level of spiritual freedom is that not only can I now dictate my own actions, my desires don't get the best of me. Second level is I can also dictate my thoughts, my imagination. So this is a person who shaitan can't get him to sin, but now he's reached level 2. Shaitan also cannot mess with his thoughts either, with his imagination. Possible. Number 3, a person who has now been liberated to a point where shaitan cannot dictate his actions. Shaitan cannot dictate his thoughts. He in fact has power and authority on the realm around him, the world around him. Shaykh Mutahari has a very beautiful discussion on this topic. Says there are people, they've reached such level of spiritual freedom, not only can their desires do not force their actions, not only do their desires not force their thoughts and imagination, now they have gained control around the world around them. This is the third level of spiritual freedom. A person who gains this spiritual freedom, then when his desires come, it's easy for him to say no to them and do the right thing. This is where you find this beautiful story of a very well-known marja by the name of Ayatullah Kuh-Kamarai. Yes? Ayatullah Kuh-Kamarai was a marja in Najaf. Yes? And his relatives have narrated the story. That he told them the story himself. And he says, I used to study or teach in the city of Najaf, and of course, marja, so people come, they listen, what you say carries a lot of weight for them. So he says, I was in Najaf, and he said, one day I decided to go to my class early. This is a person who has spiritual freedom. When the time comes to make the right decision, he makes the right decision. And a person who doesn't have this spiritual freedom, when the time comes to make the right decision, his desires will get the best of him. He will create corruption. He will create problems. Sometimes on a grand scale, like we're seeing in the world today, sometimes in his own family, sometimes in his own relatives, yes? That's why it's a lesson for all of us. So he said, one day I went to the class early. I went to the masjid early because my students were going to gather. And I thought I'll go to the masjid early and I'll just prepare and get ready. He says, when I got there, I saw in the corner of the masjid this Sayyid who was sitting there. And the Sayyid he's teaching, but the clothes he's wearing, very, very modest, yes? Just a bunch of holes in it, and some of them are patched up, and I can tell he doesn't come from a wealthy background. Now, of course, in that day and age, with the lives that people were living in that part of the world, this was very normal. We're used to this wealthy lifestyle, yes? That time, A lot of these scholars didn't have food sometimes to eat. So he said, I saw this Sayyid sitting in the corner, and I thought to myself, I don't know who that is. He's teaching a couple other students, so I didn't make too much of it. I waited for my students to come, and so we had the class. So the second time I came, again, I saw he's sitting over there. I came early. This time I told myself, I'm going to go sit in his class. See who this person is, what is he teaching, what is he preaching, all this kind of stuff. So I went and sat in the class, yes? Sat in his class, so the points he's making are very good points. These are points, I teach this class, but I'm not even aware of these points. Third day, I came again early. Went and sat in his class. And I realized, he's a lot more knowledgeable than me. He knows a lot more than I do. Fourth day came around. They say Ayatollah Kukanay came to his class. All of his students gathered. He said, yes, Shaikh, we're ready for your class. He said, today we're not going to have a class anymore. I say, why? You're like the grand marja, you're supposed to teach us all this kind of stuff. He said, yes, there's this other Shaikh has come. Other scholars come. He's a lot more knowledgeable than me. From now on, I'm not going to have my class anymore. We're going to go sit in his class. That person became Shaykh Murtada Ansari. His books taught all over the Hawza and Qum and Najaf today. Yes? It's a person who has spiritual freedom. Now, if you and I, someone comes to you and says, listen, there's somebody who's more worthy of this role that you want to play. Someone else who can do it better. Forget about role, forget about all this. Your child comes and tells you something and your child's right. Some of us don't even have the spiritual freedom to say, you know what? I was wrong in this situation. You were right. Your wife tells you something and then after 6 years you realize, you know what? Actually, she was right. Are you man enough to step up and say, you know what? I apologize. You were right about this. Your husband tells you something. Yes? I have to say both sides, otherwise they get upset at me. Husband was telling you something for many years. Now after many years you realize, you know what? He was right actually about this. I was wrong. Do you turn around and say, no, you know what? Actually, you're right. I have to give you credit for this. This is spiritual freedom. The person who has spiritual freedom, he will have success in this world and in the next world. The one who loses the spiritual freedom, he constantly lets his desires get the best of him, then he will fail. Eventually, he will fail in this world, and he will certainly fail in the next world as well. This is why when Fatima came and stood in Masjid al-Nabi, she turned to these people, she said, your desires are getting the best of you. Otherwise, you know very well that the Prophet made us the guides for the Ummah. You know very well that you are not allowed to take away that from me because it was the gift of the Prophet to me. And then she continued and she said, Ayyuhal Muslimun, Ayyuhal Muslimun, if you're not going to give me the gift that the Prophet gave to me, which she was using for multiple years anyways, then she said, well, at least give me my inheritance. You're going to take away my inheritance. Yabna Abi Quhafa, referring to the first Khalifa. Yes? Afi Kitabillah. Is it true in the book of Allah it says, Tarithu Abak, you get inheritance from your father. Wala arithu Abi, but I don't get inheritance from my own father. Why is Fatima making such a big deal out of this garden of Fadak? Well, for multiple reasons, because the garden of Fadak was not a small thing. But beyond that, she's already seeing that the Prophet has passed away not too long ago. Maybe 2 months ago, a month ago. And now already people who have strong desires, they have come forward and they're making their own decisions. That's why so much of the khutbah of Lady Fatima was about how the Muslims are in debt to the Prophet. Because the Prophet came and changed everything, now you're undoing everything that the Prophet did. All of this because of what? Because there were those who had desires that went unchecked. And in the path of fulfilling these desires, they were willing to commit many sins. They were willing to take away the rights from many people, including from the purest household of all, the grandchildren of the Prophet and the daughter of the Prophet herself. This is why Lady Fatima went through such difficult times during these days and nights. Sallallahu alayhi wa Fatima az-Zahra. Sallallahu alayhi ya bint Rasulillah. Let's dim the lights, inshallah. Take our hearts to the city of Medina. Let's take our hearts to those moments where Ali has now taken the body of Fatima and he began to do the ghusl and kafan of Lady Fatima. And imagine Ali sees the impact of the attack on the house, on the body of Fatima. And imagine what the heart of Ali is going through in these moments. How difficult was it for Ali first to bury the Prophet himself, and now in such a short time, bury the daughter of the Prophets. The heart of Ali is going through so much pain. He said, I called out, Ya Fidda, Ya Hassan, Ya Hussein, Ya Zainab, Ya Kulthum, all of you come, because this is the final moment where you will see your mother. فَهَذَا الْفِرَاقَ وَالْلِقَاءُ وَاللَّهُ فِي الْجَنَّةِ. The next time you will see your mother will be in heaven, inshallah. Imagine these women and children come and gather. You've seen sometimes when someone loses a family member, what happens to those who that person leaves behind? What happens to the aitam of that person? Now imagine if that person is as compassionate and as kind as Fatima Zahra. Imagine what happened to the hearts of the women and the children of Fatima in these moments. The narration says that Ali then carried the body for the body to be buried. But none of the words of Ali were as painful as those words that Ali said after he buried the body of Fatima. The narration says he then turned to the grave of the Prophet and he began to speak to the Prophet. He said, Ya Rasulullah, Assalamu alayka ya Rasulullah, my salam goes to you. Anni wa an ibnatika al-nazilati fi jiwarik. From me and from that daughter of yours that is now returning to you. Ya Rasulullah, inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Ya Rasulullah, now Fatima is returning to you. فَلَقَدْ اسْتُرْجِعَتِ الْوَدِيعَةِ. Ya Rasulullah, I've come to bring back the amana that you gave to me. I've come to bring back that amana that you entrusted me with. But Ali continued. Ali said, Ya Rasulullah, ask Fatima what the ummah did to her after you left this world. Ask Fatima of the oppression that she went through after you left this world. Ask Fatima how they gathered around the house, how they threatened to burn this house down. Even when they were told that Fatima is in the house, they didn't care. Ya Rasulullah, ask your daughter of how the ummah, all of them came together to take the rights of your daughter Fatima. And then the lines continue and Ali says, Ya Rasulullah, now that I've lost your daughter, قَلَّ عَنْ صَفِيَّتِكَ الصَّبْرِ. It's become so difficult for me. I come to this house and Fatima's not in this house anymore. I used to come anytime I had difficulty and pain. I used to come to the house and Fatima used to bring me some comfort. She used to bring me some tranquility. Now Ali walks into this house, there's no one to welcome him anymore. Now Ali has to carry all of the burdens of this ummah by himself. Ali said, Ya Rasulullah, it's become so difficult for me not to have your daughter around. Amma huzni fasarmadun. Ya Rasulullah, from now on my sadness will never end. My sadness will continue forever. Wa amma layaliya, my nights famusahadun. Know that my nights from now on will be sleepless. I will not sleep well like I used to with Fatima anymore, because I don't have Fatima around with me anymore. Then Ali turned to the Prophet of Allah and said, Ya Rasulullah, I say salam to you, salama muwaddi'in. Now I have to say goodbye to Fatima. And I have to say goodbye to you as well. But I'm only saying goodbye because I have to leave. Wala sa'imin. I don't say goodbye because I'm tired of speaking to you. I don't say goodbye because I want to leave. A little bit of the heart of Ali was buried with Fatima that day. A little bit of the existence of Ali was buried with Fatima that day. Until the rest of his life, he remembered Fatima every day of his life. What pain did Ali go through in those moments when he speaks of his masa'ib to the Messenger of Allah. Imagine as Ali walks away from where Fatima is buried to the house, now he has aitam of his own. This man who used to take care of the aitam of Medina and Kufa, Now he has the aitam of his own. And now he walks into this cold house. And these women and children don't have their mother around them anymore. Imagine the atmosphere in the house of Fatima. The night where Fatima was buried. This house is so cold at this point. The warmth of their mother Fatima is no longer there anymore. What happened to the heart of Ali in these moments? What happened to the heart of Zainab? What happened to the heart of Hassan and Hussein? ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. Let's take a moment to recite Surah Al-Fatiha for all of your marhumin and marhumat. Shuhada of Palestine and Lebanon and Palestine and other parts of the world, and all Muslimin and Muslimat. With Allah salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Bismillah.
صاحب हाय बाबा तेरी ज़हरा पे मुसीबत की घड़ी है हाय बाबा तेरी ज़हरा पे मुसीबत की घड़ी है कैसे दरवाज़ा हटाऊं कैसे मोहसिन को बचाऊं सांस सीने में रुकी है तेरी ज़हरा पे मुसीबत की घड़ी है हाय बाबा तेरी ज़हरा पे मुसीबत की घड़ी है हाथ में जिसके मेरा हाथ दिया था तुमने कह के मन कुन तो जिसे मौला
आज रुखसार हो रही है तुमसे ज़हरा यारी, 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 आज रुखसार हो रही है आज रुखसात हो रही है पर्दाए शब में मेरी मैयत उठाना यारी,
या भी अब्दुल्लाह, या भी अब्दुल्लाह, या ibn al-Zahra, ya ibn al-Haydar, یک و تنها ظهر عاشورا، ای بی کفن دور از وطن، ما را رسان به کربلا، ما را رسان به نینوا، روان ما حاجات ما شفا بده، مرزای ما یارین ما رهبر ما، یا بی عبدالله، یا بی عبدالله، او بر مشامم میرسد هر لحظه بوی کربلا، در دلم ترسم بمانم آرزوی کربلا، تشنه آب فراتم ای اجل مهلت بده، تا بگیرم در بغل قبر شهید کربلا، حسین يا حجة ابن الحسن أجل لنا ظهوره من با که گویم این که بهارم خزان شده ما هم به خاک تیر غربت نهال شده بانوی بینشان که به هر سو نشان زموست رفت از برم به قامت همچون کمان شده السلام عليك يا بنت رسول الله السلام عليك يا بنت نبي الله السلام عليك يا بنت حبيب الله السلام عليك يا بنت خليل الله السلام عليك يا بنت صفي الله السلام عليك يا بنت أمين الله السلام عليك يا بنت خير خلق الله السلام عليك يا بنت أفضل أنبياء الله ورسله وملائكته السلام عليك يا بنت خير البرية السلام عليك يا سيدة نساء العالمين من الأولين والآخرين السلام عليك يا زوجة ولي الله خير الخلق بعد رسول الله السلام عليك يا أم الحسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة السلام عليك أيتها الصديقة الشهيدة السلام عليك أيتها الرضية المرضية السلام عليك أيتها الفاضلة الذكية السلام عليك أيتها الحوراء الإنسية السلام عليك أيتها التقية النقية السلام عليك أيتها المحدثة العليمة السلام عليك أيتها المظلومة المغصوبة السلام عليك أيتها المفتهمة المغمورة السلام عليك يا فاطمة بنت رسول الله ورحمة الله وبركاته. Let us take our hearts this day when we are commemorating our mother Fatimiyya Zahra, who are hidden in a grave that no one knows where it is other than her son Sahib al-Zaman. يا فاطمة الزهراء يا بنت محمد يا قرة عين الرسول يا سيدتنا مولاتنا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيهة عند الله اشفعي لنا عند الله يا وجيهة عند الله اشفعي لنا عند الله اللهم عجل لوليك الفرج والعافية والناصر اللهم أدرك بنا قيامه واشهدنا أيامه واجعلنا من خير أعوانه وأنصاره اللهم انصر من نصر الدين اللهم انصر من نصر الدين واخذل الكافرين اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك وتمتعوا فيها طويلا برحمتك يا ارحم الراحمين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء ويشف الهم ويشف الضر أجرتم وفاطمة سلام عليها على محمد وآله صلوات Inshallah, we will continue the program with the lunch. And after the lunch is over, for those of you who want to stick around for a